It's Monday night and it's daytime. Beyond the headlines, I'm Odette Campbell. This evening we continue our series. Last week we started our elections watch. We know elections are not due until 2023, but in the political game, political field, we know just about anything can happen. So GBN is keeping its fingers on the pulse. I'm pleased to present another in the series. Tonight we're looking at gender and politics. And I'm glad that we have an excellent panel as always, but tonight we have two women. We have three women and one man. And the beautiful thing that we keep doing in recent times is adding a youthful voice. We've been told that we keep having mature voices and we need to inject more youth, and I'm happy that we're able to achieve that in recent times and continuing this evening. Let's introduce the panel. We start in Trinidad and Tobago with Miss Sunity Maharaj. She's the director of the Lloyd Best Institute of the West Indies. Sunity, good night, and it's great as always to have you. Great. And we're coming back in studio and we have with us Miss Margaret Nichols. Ms. Neckles is the former president of the Senate, and we'll tell you a little bit about how as the program goes along. We'll stay in studio before crossing over to Jamaica. In studio, we have a youth entrepreneur, Mr. Andy Williams. For those of you who hear about a hotspot, that's the man behind the hotspot, and we're so happy to have a youth entrepreneur with us. And we're going to Jamaica, the land of passion and excitement, and a very passionate woman indeed, with a big smile, Miss Christina Williams, and she is a graduate of the University of the West Indies with a multidisciplinary degree in international relations, policy, and Mandarin. But she's got some political veins buried inside of there. We need to watch beyond the headlines, come back to this tape sometime, because we just think in the future there are great things ahead of her. So happy to have all of you this evening on tonight's program.
Thank you.
We're starting in Trinidad. Sunity Maharaj, she's no stranger to Beyond the Headlines. And Sunity, we're talking gender and politics. It's a broad theme. When you say gender and politics, what really are you talking about?
Well, people tend to think it's about women in politics, but I think it's about the recognition that different genders bring different perspectives, and that the balance of power between them and is expressed in how we do and how we approach politics and the roles we assign to people, so that it is an element in the same way that one might talk about class politics. One can talk about race politics, one can talk about gender politics, and then this is gender and politics. So I think we can take a very broad perspective on it, but I think a lot of it has to do with women in politics and the role, the power, and the power dynamic between men and women and how they shape their politics.
And there's a lot of talk about that, and we have with us Miss Margaret Nichols. She's a former president of the Senate in Grenada. Ms. Nichols is somebody who is well placed to talk about this because she's been one of the lone voices in the wilderness over the years and still plowing on. Ms. Nichols, gender and politics, what are your thoughts?
Where do I start? Over the years, it has been very difficult to get the right people in the right places. I still have hope now because I've seen a lot of young people, especially the one you just introduced, or guest there. But I'm very passionate about it. I believe that women have a very vital role to play in the development of the country. And I will support not just a woman, not any woman, but a woman when you see her, you know that how she carries herself, what her interests are, maybe her background in community work. You know, she has a love for people, and that's very important. Not just a woman, you know, because if I had to vote for just a woman and there was a man who I believe would fit the role better, I would vote for the man.
And it's interesting that you say that, and we'll hear from Peter Wickham a little later. Actually, it was Sunity and Peter having a discussion right here on Beyond the Headlines, and they suggested that we do have a conversation on gender and politics. He's done a lot of work in that realm, and we will hear from him. We know France, it's way past his bedtime. It's past midnight in France right now, so he couldn't join us on the panel this evening, but he has some thoughts which line up with what you're saying, so we'll go to him. He did graciously send us a contribution, a voice note this evening, so we'll play that. But let's cross to Jamaica, where we have Christina Williams. As we said, she's a graduate of the University of the West Indies, multidisciplinary degree in international relations, policy, and Mandarin. She is currently pursuing a law degree, but she's no stranger to the political landscape, having worked directly and indirectly with numerous governments and the agencies to champion various causes around sustainable community and national development. So Christina seems to be on point to fit in with what you said. Christina, gender and politics, what does that mean to you?
Gender and politics for me has, I would say, similar meaning as posited by Ms. Maharaj and our former President of the Senate. But for me, in a youth context, and I like to speak from the context of young people because that's what I'm representing here on the panel tonight. For me, it's about gender in the sense of parity between the sexes. We have always had women supporting men. Women, it's not a new thing that women have been a part of political parties, that women have helped to put in many presidents and prime ministers. Women have been foot soldiers. They have supported these political leaders to where they are. But outside of that, there's also the other aspect of gendered policies. So you are a politician and you have your different policies and programs. How is it that you ensure that these different pragmatic endeavors of your political party or of your administration speaks to gender development? So I think it's not enough to just think about gender in politics as just male and female running in a particular campaign. Also to think about when you have one, how is it that your policies have gender nuances? Because I have seen where there are women who have been elected, but they're not women-centered. So they have been elected, but their policies don't result in the betterment of other women or of girls. So if we're talking about representation of women and men, that's one thing, but we also want to see the policies working to ensure that there's development of all genders.
Well, I want to come to Andy, but you've just made... You touch a very touchy subject here, women, but their policies are not women-centered. Is that possible? Because you think...
Yes.
All right. So
it very much is possible.
All right, so we'll pick up on that. Andy, and some people might wonder, what is this man doing in the midst of this women conversation? And what is your thought on gender and politics? Sunity said that, you know, it's not just supposed to be about women, but it's a large part of the conversation. Ms. Neckles alluded to that as well. What are your thoughts here?
Right. Well, if you look at the history, right, come on, like when I was going to school in Palma in the 1980s, I heard about this lady called Eugenia Charles from Dominica. And she was elected when she was 61 years old in Dominica. And she lasted for she was the Prime Minister of Dominica for 15 years, until she was 76 years. You know, and thus far in the region, we have had approximately 11 women Prime Minister in the region. At present, we have 3 women Prime Minister in the region. And if you look at the one that's making the most impact right now, it's Mia Mottley.
In Barbados.
You know, in Barbados, you know. And I mean, you can see her class, you know, you can see she's not just a yes woman. You can see her class, you know, she stands up, you know, and she's not someone that you could just run through. And when she speaks, people listen. Biden listen, and everyone listens when she speaks, you know, and it is just something about women, as I was telling Mrs. Neckles a while ago. When you have a focused woman, there's nothing that could be that. A focused woman. You see, women sometimes tend to mature or take on a responsible role earlier than men, and they will go through certain things. Watch me. A focused woman, a woman that went through certain things, sometimes they are resilient. They are powerful. They have gone through the test. So now they have what it takes just as men to make it. So I am for women. If you look in my organization, I employ mostly women because when you see they are focused, there's nothing to beat that.
So Wendy, I said, Wendy, Andy, you're not afraid that some of your pals are going to be beating up on you tomorrow for the comments that you just made?
No, well, see, anyone who knows me, right, knows that I say it as it is, right? I don't I like to be frank, but that's something that I recognize, and as we go along, I'll kind of explain to you why. Again,
okay, as we go along, we'll continue. Right. Sunity, we're coming back to you this evening, and some people are saying that this subject is being beaten up and really there should not be this focus so heavily on gender and politics, looking particularly at the need for increased women voices in the political sphere. Do you agree?
Well, look how long men were in charge. Anybody ever quarreled about men? They didn't even need to talk about men in politics. It was assumed that political leader was a man. Nobody had to discuss it. But whenever you are fighting to make a breakthrough, and not a fashion, the demand for women taking a place wherever they are interested in or qualified, or not even politics, in the workplace, whatever, that a woman is competent, is interested in doing that she must not be consigned to some backroom role. We had a prime minister in Trinidad who took great pride in the fact that he had what he called a kitchen cabinet in his cabinet. It was all that was considered the soft positions in cabinet, like child services, social welfare, and community development. Those were all given to women, and he called them his kitchen cabinet. Political parties have the women's arm, and they are considered the machinery. They are the foot soldiers, they do all the work behind the men, and the men talk proudly about how great and how much they depend on these women. But where are the women in the front line? The minute a woman steps out and says, I'm ready, then you see all the system attempts to close out and shut out that person. And you hear, women, I'm sure we will get to this discussion about all the tactics that are used to keep women in their place. And this is, again, not just in politics, it's everywhere. How you keep women in their place. Of course, public shaming is one of the biggest ways of doing it. Using their sexuality against them is another way. Laughing at them is another way. And you hear it, every prime minister has had to undergo that. But the point that your colleague here from Jamaica made is about, so there is the issue to emerge, to be accepted as a candidate for leadership and to be accepted as a candidate. Once that has happened, a lot of women, and it doesn't matter if they're prime minister or they become a chief executive officer of a company, they enter a world that is already shaped and defined for men. And their options at that point, if they have not thought through the issue of gender politics or gender and politics, they find themselves having to fit their policies and themselves and prove that they are as good as men in a man's world. And this is where you come down to the point of women who are not making a difference. Right? They don't tackle things like women in the labor force, women's rights, women's health, women's children, and all the support for young mothers, girls, and so on, the role of girls in, the place in education, the support, and so on. The policies don't reflect an understanding of how women and girls are marginalized in the economy and in any other sphere. And that is where you look to see whether being a woman makes a leader more aware and more courageous in transforming a system so that we don't have to talk about men and women, we just talk about people who are serving the national interest and doing it at a very high level, right? So that until that happens, we will be talking about gender. We will be, because people are being shut out, people are being annihilated, people are scared to come forward. Many competent women do not come forward because they are afraid that the kind of damage that they will have to take on the platform will hurt their children, will hurt their families. And so they say, I will be the power behind the throne, and they take that position.
Ms. Neckles, I see you shaking your head and you're saying yes, yes, yes. Go right ahead.
I just want to touch on what you just said. It is a fact that a lot of women don't come forward because of the verbal abuse they would suffer. During the campaign and even before, people get really ugly when they start going back into your past. You know, they talk about you in such derogatory ways that a lot of women decide, listen, I'm not exposing myself or my family to this kind of abuse. But I want to touch on the point where that should not keep women back from doing it, because when you talk about a man that way, he seemed to be able to be a champ. When you talk about maybe if he had affairs or if he left his wife or something, he's a macho man. If when they speak about a woman, it takes a different meaning altogether, and some women are not prepared to expose themselves to that. But I'm saying that the youth today, I don't think that would debar them from entering politics at all. I think they're prepared for it because they see what the game is if they want to get you out of the running. So I think the youth, the young people today are prepared to stand up. This is why I think it's important that we train them, we encourage them, you know, that we expose them to, because you could find women in the community who would be excellent politicians, but they need the encouragement and they need the support from older folks like myself.
And you're saying that tongue in cheek, right?
No.
Because people are age shaming. Yeah.
These days. But I think if we sort of get the right persons, if they come forward, but I don't think that should be just plucked out of the basket. The woman must have the interest first and foremost of her community. She must be doing something. She must not just be a token person that you says, okay, we need 5 women, so we'll pick Jane, Jillian, and some others to fit the space. We don't want token women. We want women who are really interested in the development of their community and country.
Andy, I saw you putting your hand up in the class.
Yeah. Because, I mean, I tend to disagree a bit. Yes, I understand that women have challenges when they enter politics, but men also have the same challenges.
But you all take it differently.
Yeah, but I mean, no, and also, if you look, if you take a close look, right, you will hardly see youths getting involved in politics. When I say hardly, like, yes, there's Mr. Deacon Mitchell who came forward for the NDC, but before that, you hardly saw any youths getting involved in politics. Because, you know, I love politics, but I'm saying, Andy boy, you know what, if I get involved, just look out. There will be a barrage of things people will try to come up with to try to put you down. You know, now why will I, all right, I'm here quietly in my corner, right, doing my little thing. Why will I step out and get involved in something that will bring me down, you know? And you find a lot of the youths looking into politics. They just decide to just stay out. There are a lot of brilliant youths outside there with degrees, like a thermometer, and they're just staying away from politics. When you see the fight You know, and let me just break it down a bit again. The society have a lot to do with it too, because we get so polarized, you know, into this, I'm referring to Grenada, into the green and the yellow, that we forget that, you know, we were Grenadians, you know. Before we were green and yellow, we are Grenadians, and I'm saying we should always put country first. But you find, you know what, boy, Andy take a stand for NMP, then I have to find a way to bring down Andy. Andy take a stand for NDC, I have to find a way to bring down Andy. So it's both the men and the women. But you find youths now looking at that. It is not a nice thing to get into, and it is very discouraging. And I want to say to Grenadians, you know, we have to start encouraging young people to get involved in politics and in the country's affair. When you look at Maurice Bishop, I mean, he was about 34 years when he got into power and so. And his entourage were like in the 20s and early 30s. And if you look at the progress that they have made in that time, you know, you're talking about the LBIWI, the airport. You're talking about NIS and all these things. All these things were, you know, was put into place by that small regime. And you can argue that that was the time when Grenada had the most progress taking place.
But I know somebody, Andy, who will then draw another line in the equation and tell you, how do you answer for this? They only lasted 4.5 years, which is somewhere else we can go. But let me cross to Jamaica and let's go to Christina. Christina, I've heard the word youth mentioned about 10 times in the last 5 minutes. So it tells me there is a space for youth. We're looking at gender and politics, and you're listening to some of the exchanges here and you're thinking, I'm on the right path?
Well, I'm not sure what path you're referring to specifically, but I will say that youth, the word youth and the word women will continue to be buzzwords because it will always make the conversation appear more meaningful. But a lot of times the engagement of young people as well as women is very tokenistic, as was mentioned by one of the other panelists. And when it's the opportunities present themselves for young people and for women to be meaningfully engaged, for some reason, the old guard still hold on to it. So I don't exactly agree with the gentleman. And as a young person, I can speak on behalf of youth when I say that we're very much interested in politics. It doesn't necessarily mean that all of us want to become prime minister or MP or senator, but a lot of us wants to see betterment and development of our country. And it starts off with voting. And when we do vote, or when we would want to vote, and when we see the persons who have been elected and then when they've been elected, they don't fulfill their promises, it creates voters' apathy. So before we even get to young people wanting to become involved in terms of running for a position, it starts off by us being able to trust our politicians. And when we see the instances of rampant corruption right across the Caribbean, and we see our politicians dip into the coffers and take out and benefit themselves, that doesn't inspire anything in us. So I don't think we should begin to point fingers at young people, because all the fingers are coming right back at the older generation to say that you have not created a good example for us. And that is why a lot of us are looking towards the private sector, because we think that there is meritocracy to be found there, and based on your achievement, you will succeed. But in politics, it's about who know who and who will push you. Even in regards to young people and women, some women are given opportunities, but then you'd have to bend over backwards. You'd have to keep in line. You have to toe the line. You cannot be too much too soon. You have to earn your place and earn your right to get a particular position. But then you have women who take on posts, whether it be as MPs or ministers, and they are ministers in name, but are they really ministers in the full sense of the word, in that when it comes down to hard decisions, the inner circle of the prime minister, of certain high-ranking members, are they within the inner circle? You have to questions. I think we have to move away from the point of just representation. I am all for representation, and I will tell people, I am the first woman president of the Jamaica Union of Tertiary Students in Jamaica. 45-year history, this body has been around, and I am the first woman. And I say that proudly because representation matters. But after there's representation, we have to move away from that. We have to advance the arguments about meaningful representation. And as I talked about women-centered policies before, because for me, it's not enough for us to have youth representatives in our parliament or to have women representatives in our parliament. And when we look at the policies and programs as a result, it still does not showcase that they're actually women being elected and they're actually young people being elected. Because why? I want to see in my country that the Domestic Violence Act has teeth. And if I have a woman who is a minister of a particular portfolio and that Domestic Violence Act of my country doesn't have teeth, does it really matter if a woman was in the post? We have to ask ourselves those hard questions. Yes, we have representation, we have achieved that, but when we have passed that point in 2021, where is that meaningful representation to the policies and programs? But back to the point of young people, I would say to the different political parties, it's not enough to just have these different youth arms. We have so many youth arms in Jamaica on each side of the divide. But when you look at who transitions to actually taking up office, it's the young person who was handpicked, or it's the woman who was handpicked and been blessed. A young person or a woman who is probably too passionate, who is probably non-partisan, won't be considered. Maybe, former President of Senate Neckles, she probably will be able to explain better why that happens more than I, because I've never taken office. But it's not enough to just say a woman is now elected and we feel like, oh, that has been achieved. Yes. Think about how is she really making change when she's been elected, or is she's been given real opportunities to make change? Is there red tape blocking this woman from achieving her fullest potential? And I also want to say this final thing before you move to the other panelists. We also have to look at, how women represent. I've seen where women who are considered to be more masculine, have a more masculine persona, tend to be taken more seriously. And I heard the gentleman make a comment earlier about Mia Motley, and Auntie Mia, persons love Auntie Mia because she comes up with no nonsense. And why do we love to say that? Because no nonsense tends to be attributed to a masculine persona. Mm-hmm. What if Auntie Mia was more, let's just use an example that we had a leader. Let's not use Auntie Mia. You had a leader who was, let's say, feminine and softer. Like, for example, the leader of New Zealand, who takes pride in her femininity. Would we feel the same about her leadership? Or would we start to think that, oh, she's soft and she's not able to take on? But because she probably have more masculine attributes or come off more masculine, we're got to digest that she is president or prime minister, or she's impactful and effective. And I've seen the words that we use to describe women when we applaud them. Oh, she's serious. Oh, she's no nonsense. All the words we tend to use to describe men. But I'd love to hear someone say she's an impactful leader because of a particular female trait. She's caring, she's empathetic. Because we define these traits as not belonging to what we expect or what we expect of a leader, which we bias is still very much there, is a man. And even when we compliment, those biases still surface. So, Christina, you have Andy scratching his head in the studio. Can we see? Yes, so there we have Andy there scratching his head. And you have some questions to answer. Yeah, but before you do, the producers have been asking now we take a commercial break and come right back. This is Beyond the Headlines. The heat is being turned up. We'll be back after this commercial break.
Foods safe after an emergency or disaster. In case of a power outage, keeping the refrigerator door closed will keep foods safe for about 4 hours. Throw out refrigerated leftovers and perishable foods after 4 hours. A message from the Grenada Food and Nutrition Council in collaboration with the Ministry of Health with support from the Pan American Health Organization.
Introducing Color by Seasons. Color by Seasons. Color by Seasons. Color by Seasons. Color by Citizens.
We support you at every stage of your life.
For business,
For your education.
for your financial freedom.
For that new ride.
Upgrade your life with the Communal. Contact us today.
You can now send a gift card to your loved ones locally or internationally thanks to the food fair. Here's how it works. Click the gift card icon or banner, customize your gift card by choosing from different templates, dollar amount, and personalized messages. You can also upload your personal design. Select add to cart and complete transaction. Allow relatives and friends to pick up an item or items at the food fair for the dollar value. Gift card, it's that easy.
Welcome back to Beyond the Headlines. This evening we're discussing gender and politics. We're crossing back to Trinidad and Tobago. We have Sunity Maharaj, the director of the Lloyd Best Institute. Sunity, so we had a passionate interjection there from Christina. So the issue of masculinity, who seems to be in charge? I know during the commercial break there was a discussion about the Honorable Mia Motley versus Kamala Persad Besesa in Trinidad, and as you delve into this, do you think that there's tokenism of some sort, or we misrepresent what should really matter?
Yeah, I mean, there's tokenism right through the system. And that is this is what a responsible electorate, you see, you will always be used in politics, whether you're a youth. They'll bring you forward and make you the minister of something. They'll put you in the Senate. If the buzzword is youth, they'll say, look at, we have the youngest person ever. Mm-hmm. If that is good enough for the youth members of the party and the adults as well, who believe in the presence of all interest groups, youth being an interest group, well, the politicians will get away with it. They will turn you into a buzzword. You'll be a type. And once you are past the gate and you're into office, that's it for you. That's all you do. You are paraded out. Same thing with women. They will say, okay, we have the first woman, this, that, and the other. But there is a responsibility on the elect. And ultimately, people have to organize to be able to create power blocks within political parties, within the country, and within organizations. That if you are a political party and you believe in that party, and you are a young person and you're organized as a youth battalion or wing of the party, whatever you want to call it, and somebody is selected from among you to represent you, that cannot be enough. You have to hold the party and that individual responsible for articulating what is the youth platform in the government, and it cannot fall on one person. And it is the failure of the electorate to hold representatives to account, and this is the meaning of meaningful representation. Somebody can't say they're representing you and then pay you no mind. They're not representing you. Right? They've used you to get somewhere. And if you allow that to happen, and if you are the women's arm, or you've been, so many women in political parties organize themselves. Political parties look for youth groups. They look for all the different women's groups. The leaders engage with them in the campaign, try to get them to support them and say, we want you all to vote for us. And people exchange their platforms and they say, this is what we want to see. They go on the platform, they promise all those things. They get into office. But if you keep supporting them after and they do not activate that platform that you have given them to get into office by holding them to account and having negotiated power, which is, in exchange for my support, this is what I want from you. And the day we are not getting it, we are walking out of this. That is what you have. But if you just give them your manifesto and they put it in their national manifesto and say all the things, and then nothing happens. Why are you staying and supporting them? Why do you become an apologist for them? Similarly with youth, and we have to get to the point where from small we are training people through the family, the education system and so on, to the first thing, to distill your interest. And that's another thing. People do not spend enough time asking themselves, what is my interest? What it is I want in exchange for my support? What am I negotiating? And that comes with the thing of individual power. I mean, political parties are an agglomeration of individual power. It should be. It should not be that your power is hijacked by the leader of a party in government who's the prime minister. Once they're in office, they've taken your power and they can do what they want. You negotiated your power. So it is really about activating personal individual power. And we have to have that translated into every layer of the society so that when you get to the top, which is government, you're building on a culture of equality. You have to see it in the church, you have to see it in the home, you have to see it in the school. How do you build justice and rights and equity and all those things and equality throughout the system? So when you get to the pinnacle, it is resting on a system that will hold that power accountable. So it is, we can't look for the rights of women or youth only to be in a political party or in government, when outside in the wider society, you have something else. Because then what you have is truly representative government, and that they represent the culture. That is what the culture is like. They can get away with it.
Yeah, so,
right?
they represent the culture.
It is
which is
it's a total cultural change.
Right. Andy, when Christina was talking, I saw you scratching your head. It's like Christina knocked you back, caused you to think. And now that Sunity is embracing these very critical points, I hear you saying, yes, that's what I was talking about. You want to come in here?
Yeah, let me just address it. Now, let's talk about Mia Motley, right?
Right.
Let me just go back on that point a bit. The first time I heard her speak, I was turned off. I was like, this lady sounds like a man. I'm not listening to her. But then I just started to listen slowly, and I realized, she had substance, she's the Prime Minister of Barbados. Now, if you look at Kamala in Trinidad now, she's more soft. She's softer spoken, but she's sharp, And there are two different tones. But to me, it's not just the masculinity, it's the substance, because you can have the biggest masculinity with no substance, and it doesn't make any sense, Now, let me just say something, right? My biggest concern here, is like, okay, we have, let's say we have a woman representing, let's say in government, right? I don't think her role should be to represent one part of the society. Why? Because her vote would have consisted of men and women, so you have to represent all parts. Now, what I think should be done, we as the public have to begin to hold our politicians responsible. They come and they promise us certain things, and we just and that's it. Now, we should have, let's say, organizations representing women. When these people come and say, I want to be Prime Minister, you have to hear what will they do for you, right? But
Andy, if we go to the point Christina was making, also Sunity, Sunity was talking about the fact that they've come and they've promised X, Y, Z, but when they get into power, it's a totally different thing. And also, the point about Christina is probably correct that you're a woman. You representing, but are you really representing? And there are all these outstanding issues that women are concerned about, and you're in the parliament, the place of influence, and we're not seeing anything being done about it.
Right. No, hear me, right? No, hear me. No, I am saying, if you represent, if I am a woman, right, and I am in power, I am supposed to represent both men and women, young and old, everyone, right? I cannot say, no, let me just represent, okay, for example, when Obama was president of America, Obama can't say, no, let me just represent black people. He has to represent everybody. No, however,
but blacks feel that he did not do enough.
I agree, but if they really understand the situation,
the black cause,
right? But if they understand his situation, he is supposed to represent everyone. No, what should happen is that, and too many times we as a people, we take anything and we just run with it. You know, what these politicians we're supposed to hold them in high esteem. They say, you know what, they are going to do X, Y, Z. For example, we know that we have an issue with women not being represented in certain on certain issues. I am saying, for example, Deacon Mitchell, he's the leader of the NDC. When he's making his show for power, he should be answering all these questions. You know, what will you do for our women? Dr. Mitchell also should be answering all these questions. And when they get into office, we have to hold them accountable for it. Now, if at the end of the day, no, I hear some people saying, you know what, Andy, I am an NMP or an NDC. And I say, hey, I don't agree that. I am Grenadian. So if I elect Dr. Mitchell to represent me, and I find Dr. Mitchell did not do a good job, it is my duty or my responsibility as a voter to take him out and put someone else who I think would do the better job for me. At the same time, if I choose Deacon to be the Prime Minister of Grenada, and I think, you know what, he did not do a good job, it is my duty to take him out from there and put whoever else I think might be able to assist. Not too many times, we as a people, the politicians come, they say they're going to do X, Y, Z, they don't do it, and we will kill to put them back. Why? We have to start judging them, and then we will see changes taking place in the system.
Which is a common point we've heard from Christina and Sunity. I'm anxious to get back to Christina, but Ms. Neckles has been here waiting for a while to jumping on several issues.
But our society is not geared to do that. We have not taught our people to behave in that way that you want them to behave. We are accustomed taking what we get. We have to educate the society for them to act in that way, holding people accountable. We're not used to that kind of politics, well, here in Grenada. How do you hold, if you ask an ordinary voter, how do you hold a politician accountable? We always accept whatever happens, and 99 out of 100 times, according to Andy, we will vote them back in. But we have to train our society to behave in that way that was Christina was talking about. We have to, because we're not used to behaving that way.
Okay, and as you say that, I would like for us to go to the Peter Wickham insert. Like I said, Peter often volunteers to participate in the program. He answers in the affirmative whenever approached, but we always have to be mindful of the fact that he lives in France and the time zones are worlds apart. So Peter, what he graciously did today was to send us his contribution via a voice note. Let's listen to Peter and we'll come back and continue the discussion. When we come back, Christina, we're coming to you in Jamaica. Sit still, sit tight.
Why has there not yet been an opportunity for women to be prime minister thus far? I think that really is a critical question, and part of it, the answer is obvious. You've had the same prime minister in Grenada for the better part of a quarter of a century, so the opportunity wasn't there for any other man, far less any other woman, to be prime minister, and I think that that's a separate issue. But when we get down to the nitty-gritty of asking why has a woman not led Grenada all this time, there's some issues that came up, and as I said to you, around 2016, 2017, I did a major study for UN Women looking at these types of issues, and we used as a case study Jamaica, Barbados, St. Lucia, and Guyana, in which we looked at the possibilities of women leadership. And what we found was that some of the major hurdles to women advancing in politics have to do with our own perceptions of what we want as representatives. One of the key things we found in the study was that people were a lot more comfortable with male representatives. when they were asked what their ideal representative looked like, ultimately it was a man that was tall and, etc. But the more key thing is that we still have, as a Caribbean people, to wrap our minds around the idea that women can lead equally as men can. And this is what we're looking for in leadership. So I just made the point that whenever we get to this conversation, we have to ask ourselves not only what is the system doing to obfuscate the efforts of women, but what are we, in terms of us voters, in terms of our perceptions of what we want from people, how have we allowed gender issues to prejudice our choices in terms of who we are willing to vote for? And that, to me, is a key thing that you guys can wrap your mind around tonight as you have your conversation. And I'm looking forward to watching the podcast a little later on. So all the best.
Thanks, Peter, for that. And when he wakes up in the morning, he will catch it on our social media platforms. So, Christina, you've heard Peter on the findings from his study, and you're smiling because...
Well, I definitely heard some mansplaining this evening, and it's understandable because I think when people speak from a place of privilege, they can't understand why it's important for us to have nuance in certain contexts. When we speak about representation and we speak about inclusion does not limit representation. So by us asking that we want gender-specific policies. And if you listen to me, I've been very clear. I've never once said that we need woman-specific policies. I've said we need gender-specific policies. And we look at even crime and violence, which is something that pervades a lot of our Caribbean communities. The way how we deal with crime and violence needs to be gender-specific, because the way in which we perpetuate crime amongst different age groups or amongst male and female is different. And so if we really want the crime strategies to be effective, we have to tackle it in a gender-specific and even age-specific manner. And it's the same thing I'm requiring across the board when we talk about gender and politics. There's nothing, it's not shameful. It's not something that we need to hide from, to dare say that we need gender-specific policies. And then when we have our politicians, whether male or female, in place, there should be gender parity in the way in which our policies take care of women and men in our society. And so I don't think we need to be saying, oh, they need to represent all of us. And this is where I don't want to even say this, but this is what the All Lives Matter thing is about versus Black Lives Matter, right? To say that because you're saying that women rights matter, youth rights matter, that you're by essence saying that everyone else's rights matter. That's not the case. We're saying that we matter too, and we want our politicians to know that we matter too, and to have these policies represent that. And from pulling my degree now, from a policy perspective, policies are most impactful when they're specific. It's because we have had this very I would say we just whitewash everything in every sector. We look at every class the same, and every problem the same, and every community is the same, and every gender the same. That's why we have these policies that don't work. Right. So I just let us dare say there's nothing wrong with having gender-specific policies and initiatives. But going back to the point about,
Christina, let me just interject here.
Sure.
Because I realized that we could have a nice back and forth between yourself and Andy on this subject. I want to ask Sunity though. Sunity, as you look at the whole issue of gender-specific issues, we heard what Peter said, and Peter said his studies found that apparently Caribbean people have this notion of what they want, and it's a tall, dark knight in shining armor. You found that to be so as well in some spheres, Sunity? Sunity, I think you're muted. Sunity, you need to unmute.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure I accept that. I think that it used to be said, for example, about in Jamaica, Jamaicans will never accept a black man, and that will work against P.J. Patterson because they're all about the brown men and fine. It happened. The fact is, when the party machinery is so strong that the very people might raise these things about somebody, but once you see they selected a person, they're all going behind that person because they want their party to get into power. And so these things, sometimes people say, they never accept a woman. And, then this very things that they did not accept, they will rationalize it and say, this is great. So I'm not sure I buy that. I think there's always a question of how people respond to polls in the Caribbean. I find they often respond to it like exams, like what is the right answer here that they might want. And I think you have to really, culturally sound for you to get the truth out of people. But I don't know the study. I'm simply saying that I am not quite certain about that view, because I believe that what pushes here is the party. The party finds a person and then people say, okay. And in fact, you see a lot of infighting until that is settled, and then everybody line up behind the leader. And it doesn't matter. So I'm not sure.
How do we go about changing that?
But did you have another question? But did you just want me to respond to the UN report?
The Peter concept of people thinking, in the Caribbean that we're not yet ready for a woman. But I want to go further and look at the issue holistically. I see we're cropping up on 5 minutes to 9, and we would only have another half an hour remaining after we take a commercial break. I want to go to an insert that was produced by one of the international agencies calling for more women in leadership, because in listening to it, I realized that across the world, it's a universal problem. So let's cross to that, and then we come back and continue the discussion.
Women bring the following qualities to leadership in Africa: a holistic and multidimensional orientation to decision making rather than linear thinking. Women also bring empathy and very high levels of emotional intelligence. This helps with team building. They also nurture and mentor others. Women in Africa are visionary. They foster a very inclusive transformation agenda, which is beneficial to the entire society.
Our mothers used to say, I wanted to do this and that, but gave up because I was a woman. Today, things have changed, but not enough. Barriers to women's leadership still need to be broken down in Asia Pacific and everywhere else.
We had some other women commented on that as well, but we just took 2 samples, Asia Pacific and on the African continent. And Andy, I see you nodding here, nodding in agreement.
How do we start? Where do we start? Yes, the change is needed, but where do we start? It's always good to put out the ideas and the policies and so, but where do we start? How do we get our society, the women in our society, to be more, not aggressive, but coming forward, not so timid, not being afraid? Where do we start?
And these seem to have
How do we change?
Right. Now, let me just say something again, right? One of the biggest things for me, when Barack Obama was named the president of America, the USA, was that, you know what, boy? Before it was impossible to think that a black man could be the president of the United States of America. No, I didn't care if he was a Democrat or a Republican. What mattered to me was that my son, my daughter, can look at Barack Obama and say, you know what, if he can be the president of America, I can be anything. So, and I think what needs to be done is that you were saying what can be done.
Yes.
But how can we inspire women? By showcasing them more. I'm sure if you ask the youth of today, no one knows that U.W.I was the first Prime Minister of Dominica, and she lasted for 15 years. So I think that we need to showcase our women Prime Ministers more in the region, especially to motivate other women also to be that. No, but one more thing, Ms. Campbell.
Go right ahead.
Right, one more thing. No, I am for women, right? But I'm also for youth. If you look at the voting population, it's over 60% of the voting population are youths. right? No, there's something about youths who tend to ignore these stereotypes. You know, you might try to pin someone as gay, right? No, we don't care about that. We care about what they can bring forward, what can they bring to the table. That's what we care about.
Yes.
So to me, we are at a stage where these barriers, right, are easier to overcome, right? And another thing again is that we need, it starts in the school, right? We need to nurture children from the school, and you know, for example, you may ask yourself, why aren't we interested in agriculture in the Caribbean? I went to GBSS, right? And you have GBSS, so you have like 1G, 1B, 1S1, 1S2. And in the Gs, we did only the science, like the chemistry, the biology, and the physics, and other things. No, we never got a chance to do agriculture science because we are considered the bright boys. So who did agriculture science now was the guys now, the less, you know, not so bright, you know.
GBSS might not be happy with you saying that. So
but that's the truth, you know, and that's facts, you know. Now, what happens is that now, when you grow up, you pass your school thinking, you know, boy, agriculture is something for the not so bright people. And I find everyone want to be a doctor, a lawyer, you know, who want to work in a bank and everything, and we ignore agriculture. Then you find out, you're asking yourself, why are we not interested in agriculture as youths? Now, so to me, you have to nurture this thing from the school.
Education.
And I agree, there's an element that a woman brings to the table that a man that is missing from the men perspective. Let me tell you why. Hold on, must get across that point. Now you have a man and a woman having a child, we were just talking about that a while ago. And if they break up, the responsibility lies with the woman. She has to be the breadwinner. She has to take care of that child. She has to go through all obstacles to make it. And there's a fighting spirit in women that men don't really tend to appreciate sometimes or have sometimes.
But Andy, I could hear some men pounding and say, Ms. Campbell, stop, Andy. Because I saw, for instance, on Facebook this morning, a photograph which spoke to just the opposite of what you're saying. They said that women are often touted as, you know, the caregivers, but there was this man who came from work and he was falling asleep on the train. It is because he was working hard for his family, working hard for his child.
Right, no, but listen to this one, and I agree that. But check how many single parents you have in our society, right? Now, when you look at Grenada or the black race, you always have the mother being the single parent, always. And the mother is
not
always...
Not true, not always. Most of the time.
Well, most of the times, right?
Yeah.
And you always have the mother, sometimes the man giving nothing, child maintenance and all this kind of thing. But the mother is always there, providing for her child. So there's an element that women bring to the table that I would love to see, right? So I am for women. Also, I am for everyone, right?
He wants to make sure, Christina, Andy is clearing his path, that he's for women and he's for everyone. Christina, just before I come to you, I'm coming to both you and Sunity. Sunity, we're looking at the examples of Kamla Persad Besessa and Portia Miller Simpson in Jamaica. Sunity, was Kamla Persad Besessa an inspiration, a good example for other women in Trinidad to follow after?
I dare you to answer.
Sunity, don't forget to unmute. Sunity?
Yeah, she's not.
Sunity, you're muted.
Sorry, I got that. I keep muting myself so I don't let the sound here feed into the discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, that is a good example of a woman, first woman prime minister being hailed as such, but there was not a gender platform for transformation of anything, transformation of the public service, transformation of women in work. So this is where we have to be cautious that of the stereotyping, of the buzzword, of the what exactly spell out the platform and have it in meaningful policy measures, right? You have to know, you can't be just waving a flag and say, we have a woman, first woman, after that it's second woman and third woman, where's the platform still, So I think that was definitely, I an example, as I spoke before, of in the campaign period. We also saw it with the current in the current government, which is led by a man, the prime minister, a male prime minister, but heavily courted the women's organizations, right? And the women's organizations went to one, and then they switched when they were unhappy with the previous. But it still hasn't made any difference, because in government there is not enough clarity on the policy measures that you are negotiating your power with when you say, I'm going to support you. There's not enough specificity so that when you get into government, it just gets lost and there is no transformation, which is ultimately what we want, is change.
Yeah, we're looking for change. Let me just ask Christina to weigh in here on the Jamaica experience with Portia Simpson-Miller.
So it was an inspirational event to have the first prime minister, similar to how Miss Sunity explained. Of course, there was room for improvement in terms of having a platform that once again would have aspects that are women-centered and endorsing or facilitating women development. So there was room for that, but we look forward, we're a very hopeful nation. We look forward to our current women leaders, what they will do to ensure that there is gender parity and that there is gender-centered policies for all. But I want to mention that, Andy mentioned, Barack Obama, but it's the same population that would have rejected Hillary as well, Hillary Clinton. And it shows that persons may be willing to take on a black man. He's black. Yes, that's outside of the norm, but it's still a man. We're more likely to digest a man more than a woman who would have served for years. She was Secretary of State. She would have been a part of the Obama's administration, and she still wasn't seen as enough by the electorate. So there is that to consider. And even with Kamala Harris, Kamala was in the race for president, and she was also rejected somewhat. And then she joined the Biden ticket and then became vice president. Let's not forget how she got to the Biden ticket. Persons love to glorify, say, yes, Kamala is not the first vice president, but we don't talk about the fact that we did, well, not we, but the electorate in the United States would have rejected her as a potential president. I want us to talk about, you may ask a question about what can we now do? And I'm very big on solutions. I'm a solutions-oriented young person. What can we now do to facilitate more women getting involved in politics, whether directly or indirectly? And I would start off by good examples in the home. The home is the cornerstone of all societies. And so it starts off by how it is that we empower women in the homes, right? We're talking about pay, ensuring that the pay is balanced between male and females. Women and men work the same jobs, and on average, we make 75 cents less than a man. There is situations of women rising to the middle level of many jobs. In Jamaica, we have very high, I think we have the highest rate of women leading in middle management, but then very few women make it to the position of CEOs. Those are also representation, things that we look at, that we internalize as little girls to say, well, I am at school with my teacher and everywhere I look, they're all female teachers. And they're saying that, because of their empathetic nature and because they're nurturing, they make perfect teachers. But then my teacher is overlooked to become principal. They probably take a man from outside to become the principal of my school. Don't underestimate how young girls internalize these very examples of how our mothers are treated in terms of how their employment, or how our teachers, our female teachers, are treated in the classroom when we're there. How we're treated as little girls, right? So they send us out to the thing you used to rub off the board, right? And you're the one who's supposed to clean the classroom, and then the boys are allowed to go outside and play. It sounds so simple, I know, but these are the things that we internalize. You look at the fact that in our institutions, particularly University of the West Indies, 70% of the population are women, which would suggest that more women are qualified than men. It's just a fact. It's what the statistics say. But then when we look at, once again, the employment sector, those who take the highest spots are men. So before we start to think about politics and the highest offices in the land, socialization, it needs to be reversed, and it starts from the home. It starts from the schools. It starts from how it is that we talk about issues of maternity leave and even paternity leave, how we talk about gender balance in terms of pay and how women can mobilize, whether in private sector or government sector roles. Those are all parts of the conversation that we must talk about as well. The politics should not be siloed, because we learn from when we're small in these environments, and then we take it to the levels. And these boys who now become men and become presidents and prime ministers and MPs, they won't take women on because we taught them when they were little boys that women are supposed to just be supporters.
So and as you're hitting some flash points, and I think the producer needs to give us a full shot of the studio, because Andy's like, see my point, Miss Neckles is saying it's the same thing I was saying. I just want to remind our listeners and viewers that you can weigh in on the conversation. The number you can call is 440-1252. 440-1252, and we found in recent times people in the diaspora dialing into the program. Just a reminder, the area code 473-440-1252. One of the points, we want to take it home because it's 9:10 already, so we'd be close to wrap up time at 9:30. Let's just take this insert from last week's program. We were looking at developments on the local political sphere, and Ms. Charlene Herbert, again, one of our youthful members of the panel, had this comment. Let's listen to what Charlene had to say last week.
The leader of the NNP, there's a call for a handover, somebody more youthful maybe. While there's a need to have that mix in terms of youth for succession planning, I think Dr. Mitchell is very experienced, and he is in a good place to train or give guidance to younger members, and it could very well be a woman, and I hope it's a woman that emerges in the NNP.
And so Charlene made her point, and that was left right there. We have a caller on the line. Caller, good evening. And he was looking at it like, can I pick up on that? Charlene left it right there. Caller, good evening.
Hello?
Yes, please, go ahead. We're hearing you. Go ahead.
Oh, yes. Good evening, and good evening to your guests. Now, that's where we're having a problem. You say leadership starts from the home, right? And men have a role to play as it relates to guiding the home. So should it be a woman in office as a prime minister or a man in office as a prime minister? What difference should it make? If a man has to play his role, and he is responsible for guiding his home, and we're supposed to take responsibility and to ensure that the women, everybody develop. In other words, is developing people. If the man is going to perform the role as a leader, performing his role, being responsible to ensure that there is development on a general basis, what does it mean having a woman in office if the man should perform his duty as a leader? To me, I don't see that importance of having a woman in office if you have a man who should perform his role from the home and to his legal office as a prime minister, as a leader.
All right. Thank you so much, Andy. I see you nodding vehemently.
I don't agree with that, because let me tell you something, right? One of the quality of a leader should be, you should be able to follow, right? Not because I'm a leader, it means that I can't follow. Christ was a leader, and he is a leader, right? Because he still lives, right? And he was washing the feet of his disciples. You know, so it doesn't mean because you're a leader that you cannot follow. And it's two different roles. I can be the leader in my household, but I'm not qualified to be prime minister. My wife could be, my wife, and she could be more qualified. Yeah. Now, what do we say? Because she's a woman, she's not qualified to be prime minister? No, and we have to get away from that. It's the qualification. Who is qualified to do the job?
Right. And I have an indication that we have another caller on the line. Caller, welcome. Caller, you there? Go ahead.
Hello, yes, I'm here.
Go ahead.
Okay, my contribution this evening. First of all, I don't think no one gender was ever assigned to rule. In the past, men have been the rulers, but now we see changes taking place and women coming into their own. I will go back to creation. God created man. He took a rib from him to make a woman his companion. Both are supposed to work together and complement each other. No one is supposed to dominate. When we're looking for women as a ruler, women to rule, not just any woman. You're looking for a woman of quality, one with ability to make decisions, one who is well-spoken, with enough intelligence to take a country from one place to the next. In the past, we've had some most politics in Grenada in particular can be most ungracious and ungrateful. We now have to get away from that. People have to learn to respect one another as a human being, whether it is a man or a woman. And we have to meet each other and rule together, whether it is woman or whether it is man. No one is supposed to dominate. We all have to work together. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contribution. And a reminder for those of you following us on social media or on radio, the number you can call is 440-1252. We're getting into the wrap-up zone. Sunity, any thoughts on the two callers' contributions that we've had so far?
I want to just take Christina's point because I think in some way it deals with the questions, which is the home. This is about a change of culture, of personal culture that is tied to certain historical parts that we've traveled. And all we are talking about, whether we're talking about women today or we're talking about youth, we're talking about some other group in the society, it is to come to a place where those distinctions will no longer matter. Where you come to the point of, may the best rise to the whatever area of responsibility that you would like to give them. May the best cricketer get selected on the team. What you're looking for is the creation of a meritocracy at all levels, where people are not kept out for reasons of their height, their color, their sexuality, their race, their gender, and so on. And you asked, I think, Mrs. Neckles raised this point about how do you achieve change? Because we can't talk about, we have to change people. We have to question whether we are fit to change, because all of us are part of the same culture. You ask for a good education system, and then you say, but who will teach you teachers? Because they have all come out of a particular kind of system. And how do you break that to get a group that can actually achieve change? How do you not entrench the culture? In the home, parents have to question themselves when they say to a girl child, well, you do so and so, let your brother go out and play. And they have to, when they find themselves saying so, they have to stop and be aware that I have just committed an act to reinforce this sense in my daughter and in my son, that he can have less responsibility and she must be the one, and I have to not do that again. It's the same thing we do with all kinds of other things. This child is darker, this child is lighter skin, and we create separations and we embed those things. How are you now expected when you get much older to not carry those things, to change yourself at that point? So we have, the societies have to introspect, our Caribbean societies are not America. They're not Europe. They're not anywhere else. Even Jamaica is not Trinidad, because you have to come down to how has the history work in a particular environment to create a particular culture that does not support a meritocracy, that does not support everyone being able to actualize their fullest potential. Mm-hmm. And these are questions that go beyond the, a first woman, a second woman. The best person should be, and until we force people to say, what is your platform? Until we say, what is my interest? What is my interest that I need to be represented in government, and become articulate about our interests? Yeah. Then we don't know how to negotiate. If you don't know your interests, you don't know what to ask for. Then somebody will tell you what you should be saying.
Yeah, very
so it is
Sunity.
It is beyond passing the buck to everybody else. I come down to this thing about engagement, articulation of interests, so on, and also being very conscious of the role each of us plays in reinforcing stereotypes.
Great. We have another caller on the line. Caller, good evening. Hello? Caller, are you there still on the line? Okay, seems like we've lost this caller. Very interesting discussion. I could sense we could go on for another hour, but we only have 10 minutes. So we're going into the wind down, wrap up mode, and we're going to start in studio. Ms. Neckles, your closing thoughts this evening?
Closing thoughts. I've attended numerous conferences since 1984. That will date me a bit, but that's okay. The First Woman Conference in Kenya. And we seem to be talking about the same thing over and over and over again. Some of the ideas put out by our young sister, Christina, the same things we were talking about on these numerous conferences. And I'm still asking the question, where do we start to make the change? Because not much has changed from that time to now. So my closing thoughts are that we should make a concerted effort with all the information we have to start programs in our community centers, in our schools, in our churches, motivating women, encouraging them and supporting them, exposing them to various activities and information so that they could make choices whether or not they want to get into politics or how far they want to go, how far, not only in the political field, but in business and all spheres of life.
In business, like our good friend here, Andy, involved in business. Right, so Christina, we're coming to you for closing thoughts as we come to the end of the program this evening.
Thank you. Also, thank you so much for having me, representing young people and Jamaica here. So my closing thoughts is that young people, young women, we are ripe and ready to be meaningfully engaged, and we just want the opportunity for that to be so. In that, we're asking for mentorship from those who have been elected, whether former or current. We're asking that you look at our passion for people, you look at our willingness to serve and our good intentions, and don't let it just be a case of, because I am someone's granddaughter or someone's cousin, that is why you have selected me or given me this opportunity. Young people out there who don't have the last name or the, how do you put it now, that person who is their benefactor, but still want to serve. And so we're asking you for mentorship, for support, and for guidance. We're asking that for those persons who are already involved, whether it be young people or for women, we're asking for the electorate of our different Caribbean nations to support us. Yes, hold us accountable, that's very important. But where it's possible, we have to work together to break the stereotypes within our own homes and within our own spaces. So instead of just pointing the finger to say, oh, the politicians need to do this and to do that, the system works to their favor in many instances, and they won't change. That we've seen that in some cases, they won't change. And so for those of us who have the the opportunity, whether it was with our children or with the students that we school, take those spaces and let them become safe spaces to grow the next leaders of the Caribbean, whether it be women or men. Let's you grow and groom gender parity from in the home and in the school. And finally, I will say, a lot of young people and a lot of women out there want to serve, and we're asking you to put financial support behind us. There's also that important part. We need financial support as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina. Sunity, your closing thoughts this evening, and then we come into Andy for the last word. Sunity, your closing thoughts?
Yeah, I will say organize, organize, organize. Young people, young women, young men, whoever, organize to the extent that you could get yourselves together, begin the conversation about what your own analysis of your society, your community, your school, whatever it is. And as you need people to come in and help, they will come. But retain your power and never surrender it to a political party to say, well, do what you want, we are just following you. Always remember that your power is to be negotiated on terms that you are that you are willing to give it and willing to take it back. Until we do that, people will take you for granted. They will take all of us for granted. And they get into office, and that's later for you. When the next election comes around, they'll come to talk to you. Are you going to get fooled up again and say, oh, this one is saying what I want to hear? No, it's not what you want to hear. You want to see a track record of performance. And you don't have to, you can choose to go into politics and represent other people on that platform. Or you might say, I don't want to be the person in politics. I have something else to do. But I'm going to hold your account because I have negotiated with you that in exchange for my support, you will do so. So we come down to an engaged society and not one that is careless with your own power.
Okay. Not one that is careless with your own power. Andy, you've got the final say.
Let me just make a clarion call to the men, as I'm the only man here, right? Probably in the next 10, 15 years, we'll be saying, how do we get men involved in politics? Let me tell you why. I went to SGU, and 80% of the class were women, and 20% were men, right? Also, you find when 5 o'clock in the afternoon or in the evening, you will see women.
Remember his closing thoughts, Andy?
Yeah, women hurrying.
On 9:29, eh?
Watch me. Women hurrying. It's actually on call to the men. They're hurrying to get involved in an evening class. And men are by the street drinking and carrying on. Guys, be careful. We are at the top. Let's continue to stay at the top and keep our eyes on the prize.
On the top, on the top. Oh, no, you're not.
And for the men, though.
Oh, no, you're not.
Miss Margaret looking at him like, really? Ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. But that's your fault for giving a man the last word.
I truly accept that as my fault. Andy, you see, it's my fault for giving a man the last word. Andy, you were going well all along.
Men have to wake up. We have to wake up, honestly. Yeah.
No, this has been a very engaging discussion. We could stay here for another hour or more, and I'm certain more of our callers would have liked to get in on the program. We did have some feedback on the social media platform that we did not share. We apologize, but the discussion was so rich. I would like to thank all of our panelists and the production team. A reminder, just in case you joined us late, we've had with us Ms. Sunity Maharaj, the director of the Lloyd Best Institute of the West Indies, Ms. Margaret Nichols, the former president of the Senate in Grenada, Mr. Andy Williams, a youth entrepreneur, and Ms. Christina Williams of the LBIWI, and she is also somebody who is sharp on her politics. She's a graduate from the University of the West Indies with a multidisciplinary degree in international relations, policy, and Mandarin, and she has been doing some lobbying. Very youthful voice, very passionate, and to all of our panelists, I owe you a debt of gratitude. And I also don't want to forget to thank the people who helped put together the panel this evening when I was struggling a little bit Grenada, you reach out and you support, and I'm indebted to you. I'm reminded before we go, for several weeks we've been saying here on Beyond the Headlines that we've come through a very difficult year and a half, and we want to raise a toast to life. So our three panelists, the three of us in studio, to those of you on Zoom, we're raising a toast to life. Quickly, Andy, you want to raise a toast to who?
Well, my dad and everyone else who has been instrumental in my progress that is not here today.
Ms. Nichols, you want to raise a toast to somebody?
Not particularly. I just want to say I just thank God for life.
We thank God for life. I raise a toast to all of Grenada, Carriacou, Petite Martinique, wherever you're in the world, following Beyond the Headlines. And to those of us who've made it, let's celebrate life. To those of you who lost your loved ones, we continue to empathize, sympathize with you, and pray for God's grace and His blessing over your lives, your loved ones, and your families. So long for now. We'll see you again next week on another edition of Beyond the Headlines. I'm Odette Campbell. 3 cheers.